My name is Grace, I'm 34 years old, and if you had met me just a few years ago, you would have thought I was the kind of person who let people walk all over her. I was quiet, accommodating, and always the one who tried to keep the peace, even when it came at my own expense. But the night everything snapped, at a family dinner in my own home, I realized I wasn't going to be that person anymore. It started with something small, like it always does. My daughter, Emily, who was only 10 at the time, asked if she could have the last roll on the table. My sister, Melissa, rolled her eyes and muttered something about, "Of course Grace's daughter gets whatever she wants." I ignored it, like I usually did. But Melissa wasn't finished. She set her fork down with a loud clink and raised her voice so everyone could hear. "You and your daughter are just taking advantage of everyone," she spat at me. Her face was red, and her hands shook as she pointed across the table. I froze. For a moment, I thought I must have misheard her. But then I saw my mother's face. She nodded in agreement, lips pressed tight, as if Melissa had spoken some undeniable truth. My chest tightened, but not from guilt. It was from rage. I looked at them, my sister and my mother, two women who had been living in my apartment rent-free for the past 6 months. Two women who had drained my patience, my savings, and my kindness. And here they were, accusing me of taking advantage. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I simply set down my wine glass, leaned back in my chair, and said calmly, "You have 24 hours to leave." The room went silent. My daughter's wide eyes flicked between me and them, as if she wasn't sure if I was serious. But I was. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control. What came next would change everything. Melissa's jaw dropped, and for once, she didn't have a snarky comeback ready. My mother, however, wasn't about to let me have the last word. She leaned forward, her voice low but sharp, like a blade sliding across the table. "You don't mean that, Grace. This is family. You can't just throw us out like we're nothing." I locked eyes with her. For years, I had let those words, "this is family," control me, guilt me, trap me into doing things I didn't want to do. Family dinners I didn't have time for, loaning out money I couldn't afford, letting them move into my home, just until they got back on their feet. But family, in their mouths, had always been a one-way street. "I do mean it," I said, my voice steady. "You have 24 hours. I want you both out by tomorrow night." Melissa scoffed and pushed her chair back, the legs screeching against the hardwood. "You're unbelievable. After everything we've done for you." I cut her off. "You mean after everything I've done for you? You've lived here rent-free. You've eaten my food, used my electricity, my water. You've treated Emily like she's a burden in her own home. I'm done." My daughter's small hand slipped into mine under the table. She didn't say a word, but I could feel the relief in her grip. She had been watching, quietly, as I let them take and take. And now, she saw me finally put a stop to it. My mother shook her head, disappointment etched across her face, as if I were the one who had betrayed her. But for the first time in years, her disapproval didn't crush me. Instead, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Melissa stormed out of the dining room, muttering under her breath, and my mother followed, slamming her bedroom door. The house fell quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm has passed. I exhaled slowly, realizing my hands were shaking. Emily squeezed mine tighter. "Mom," she whispered, "are they really leaving?" "Yes," I said, looking her straight in the eyes. "They're leaving." But I knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My chest was heavy with the weight of what I had said the night before, but there was no regret. If anything, there was a strange lightness under the anxiety, like I had finally loosened a chain I didn't even realize I'd been dragging around. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, waiting. Sure enough, I heard Melissa's door open. She walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened, hair a mess, still in her pajamas. Without asking, she poured herself a cup of my coffee and plopped into the chair across from me. "So," she said casually, like she was talking about the weather. You didn't mean that crap last night, right? You were just mad. I didn't answer right away. I sipped my coffee, calm and deliberate. She hated silence, it always made her twitchy. Finally, I set my cup down and looked at her squarely. I meant every word. You need to be out by tonight. Her smirk faltered. You can't be serious. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem, I said. My voice surprised me. It was cold, steady, not the shaky whisper she was used to from me. Melissa's face twisted. You're heartless, Grace. You think you're better than us just because you've got this apartment and some crappy office job. You wouldn't last a day without us. I almost laughed. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. I'd been paying the rent, keeping the lights on, buying the groceries, while they lounged around as if they were the ones doing me a favor by existing under my roof. Before I could reply, my mom appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, lips pursed tight. Melissa's right, she said flatly. You're throwing away your family. You'll regret this. I stared at them both, the two women who had taught me that family meant sacrifice, but only mine. This wasn't sacrifice anymore. This was exploitation. You've got until 8 tonight, I said, standing up. If you're not gone, I'll change the locks. The look on their faces told me they finally realized I wasn't bluffing. By noon, the tension in the apartment was unbearable. Melissa had been slamming cabinets, stomping through the hallway, and muttering loud enough for me to hear. My mother didn't speak to me at all, she just gave me those pointed looks, like she was waiting for guilt to settle in and undo me. But it didn't. Instead, I started bagging up their dirty dishes and setting them on the counter near the sink. I wasn't about to clean up after them anymore. When Melissa saw me, she scoffed. Real mature, Grace. You think you can just throw us out like garbage? I didn't rise to it. If you need boxes, I have some in the storage closet. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She wasn't used to me being this calm, this unmoved. Normally, I'd be rushing to explain myself, softening my words so no one stayed angry. Not this time. By mid-afternoon, Melissa was on the phone, pacing back and forth. I heard her whining to one of her friends about how I was kicking them out for no reason. My mom sat on the couch, silent, watching daytime TV as if nothing was happening. It was surreal, like they were both trying to pretend this was just a phase I'd snap out of. At 4 o'clock, I walked into the living room. 4 hours left, I said simply. Melissa turned to me, eyes wide. You're not serious. You can't just change the locks. That's illegal. I raised an eyebrow. No, what's illegal is squatting. And since you're not on the lease, you don't have a leg to stand on. For once, she didn't have a comeback. She looked at Mom, who shifted uncomfortably but didn't defend her this time. The realization was sinking in. Emily peeked out from her room, eyes wide, watching the scene unfold. I gave her a small nod, trying to reassure her. Tonight, things would finally change. By the time the clock struck 7, my nerves were tight as piano wires. I tried to keep busy, folding laundry, tidying up the kitchen, but my ears stayed alert for every sound in the apartment. Melissa had gone quiet after hours of pacing and ranting, which worried me more than her tantrums. Silence, from her, was never a good sign. At 7:30, I walked into the living room. My mother and Melissa were sitting on the couch, arms crossed, staring at the TV like a pair of statues. Neither of them had packed a single thing. My gut twisted, but I forced my voice to stay even. You've got 30 minutes. Melissa finally looked at me, her eyes narrowed. You're really going through with this? Kicking your own mother and sister out on the street? You're disgusting, Grace. I felt Emily step behind me, her small hand resting against my arm. I straightened my shoulders. I'm going through with it. You both had months to figure out your lives, and instead you made mine, and my daughter's, miserable. I won't allow it anymore. Melissa jumped up from the couch, her voice rising. You think you're so tough now? You're pathetic. You need us. You always have. That was the moment something inside me finally snapped. All the years of being called weak, selfish, ungrateful, they came rushing back, but this time they didn't break me. They fueled me. No, I said firmly, locking eyes with her. I don't need you. I never did. And after tonight, you're not my problem anymore. The room fell quiet. My mother's face tightened, but she didn't speak. For once, even Melissa didn't have a quick insult to throw back. At 7:55, I walked to the front door, keys in hand. You've got 5 minutes. If you're not out, I'm calling a locksmith, and the police if I have to. That's when the panic set in. The moment I said police, Melissa's face drained of color. For all her talk, she had no interest in an actual confrontation with the law. She darted a look at Mom, who shifted uncomfortably on the couch. You wouldn't call the cops, Melissa said, her voice tight, almost pleading now. I tilted my head. Try me. I could feel my daughter's eyes on me from the hallway. For her sake, I needed to stay steady. So I pulled my phone from my pocket and started scrolling to the non-emergency police line. My thumb hovered above the call button. Melissa shot up from the couch. Okay, fine, she yelled, her voice breaking. We'll go. But this is low, Grace. Real low. Mom finally spoke, her voice dripping with bitterness. You'll regret this. When you're alone, don't expect us to come running. I almost laughed at that. Alone? I wasn't alone. I had Emily. And what I wouldn't have anymore were 2 grown women who treated me like a doormat. That sounded more like freedom than loneliness. At 8:03, Melissa started gathering things, her purse, a few clothes thrown into a duffel bag she'd dug out from the closet. Mom moved slower, deliberately dragging her feet like she was trying to make a point. But I stood firm at the doorway, arms crossed, waiting. Finally, at 8:27, I watched them walk out the door with their bags, Melissa muttering curses under her breath while Mom refused to even look at me. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't apologize. I just closed the door behind them, locked it, and slid the chain in place. Emily ran up and hugged me so tight I almost lost my balance. You did it, Mom, she whispered. And in that moment, with the apartment finally quiet and the weight of years lifting from my shoulders, I realized she was right. But I also knew this wasn't the end of the story. My sister wasn't the type to let go without trying to get back at me. And I was ready for her. For a couple of days, it was blissfully quiet. Emily and I ate dinner in peace, watched movies without someone making snide remarks, and walked around the apartment without tripping over Melissa's mess or listening to Mom's constant criticisms. The air felt lighter, like the whole place had exhaled. But I knew Melissa. And Melissa wasn't going to just disappear. The first sign came 3 days later. I got a call at work from my landlord. He sounded uneasy. Grace, I got a voicemail from your sister. She said you've been subletting without permission and letting people live there illegally. That true? My stomach clenched. No. Absolutely not. My sister was staying temporarily, but she's gone now. He sighed. All right, I figured she might be exaggerating, but I had to ask. Just, keep me in the loop if she causes trouble, okay? I thanked him and hung up, my hands shaking. I wanted to be angry, but really, I wasn't surprised. Melissa's go-to move had always been twisting the story to make herself the victim. That evening, as I walked Emily home from school, I noticed a car parked across the street. Melissa's car. She was sitting inside, pretending to scroll on her phone, but I knew she was watching us. Emily gripped my hand tighter when she noticed. Mom, she whispered, why is she here? Because she doesn't know how to let go, I said softly. But don't worry, she can't hurt us. Still, the sight of her car outside rattled me. Over the next few days, I caught her there more than once, idling, watching, waiting. Sometimes Mom was with her, though she never looked my way. Melissa wasn't done. She was circling, looking for an opening, a way to get back inside my life. But what she didn't realize was that I'd finally learned how to fight back. The escalation came faster than I expected. One Friday evening, I came home to find a note slipped under my door. The handwriting was unmistakably Melissa's, big, loopy, and full of dramatic underlines. "You think you're so righteous, Grace, but everyone's going to see the truth. You're a liar, a user, and I'll make sure you pay for what you did to us. Family doesn't just throw family out like garbage." I crumpled it and tossed it straight into the trash, but my hands were shaking. Emily saw the note before I could hide it, her face pale. "Is Aunt Melissa coming back?" she asked nervously. "No," I said firmly, though I wasn't entirely sure. "She's just trying to scare us. That's all." But the next day, the calls started. My coworkers pulled me aside, asking if everything was okay at home. Apparently, Melissa had been messaging some of them on social media, telling them I'd abandoned my mother and was mentally unstable. One coworker even showed me the messages. Reading her words, dripping with venom and lies, made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled at my coworker and said, "Thank you for letting me know. She's not well, and I'll handle it." When I got home, Emily was sitting on the couch with her backpack still on, looking uneasy. "Mom," she whispered, "there was a lady outside who asked me if I wanted to go see my grandma." Ice flooded my veins. Melissa. That night, I double-checked every lock and called a friend who worked in law enforcement. He gave me advice: document everything, keep records of the notes, the calls, the stalking. Melissa thought she was playing her usual game, push me until I broke, then swoop in when I begged for peace. But she underestimated me. I wasn't breaking this time. That weekend, after putting Emily to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. For the first time in years, instead of reacting to Melissa's chaos, I decided I was going to be proactive. If she wanted war, fine, I'd give her one. But it was going to be on my terms. First, I listed out everything she'd done since leaving my apartment: the false claims to my landlord, the stalking, the note, the harassment of my coworkers, and most terrifying of all, approaching Emily outside school. That was the line that could never be crossed. I called my friend Mark, the one in law enforcement, and laid everything out. He listened carefully before saying, "Grace, you've got more than enough to file a restraining order. Especially with her approaching your daughter. Judges don't play around with that." The idea lit something inside me. For years, I'd been scared of pushing back because I didn't want to cause drama in the family. But now? Melissa had already caused all the drama. All I had left to do was protect myself and my daughter. Over the next few days, I started documenting everything: screenshots of her messages, the note, the times I saw her car parked outside. I even bought a cheap camera to set up near the window, just in case she tried to come to the door. Meanwhile, I acted like nothing was wrong whenever she circled around, watching me. I wanted her to think I was still the same Grace she'd always known, the one who'd eventually crack, cave in, and apologize. But every night, after Emily went to bed, I sat with my growing stack of evidence. Piece by piece, I was building the case that would finally cut Melissa out of our lives for good. For the first time in a long time, I felt powerful. And Melissa had no idea what was coming. The morning I went down to the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of nerves and determination. My hands shook as I clutched the folder I had put together: printouts of messages, photos of Melissa's car parked outside my building, and the note she had slipped under my door. But underneath the fear was something stronger: resolve. I wasn't doing this just for me. I was doing it for Emily. The clerk at the family court office was kind, walking me through the paperwork. When I explained Melissa had approached my daughter outside her school, the clerk's eyes hardened. "That's enough right there," she said firmly. "Judges don't take that lightly." When I finally stood before the judge, I expected to feel intimidated. But instead, as I laid out the timeline of harassment, something shifted inside me. Every word I spoke chipped away at the old Grace, the one who used to make excuses for Melissa, who used to back down to keep the peace. The judge listened carefully, flipping through my documents. Then he looked at me and said, "Ms. Grace, based on the evidence, I'm granting a temporary restraining order. Your sister is not to come within 500 feet of you, your daughter, or your residence until the hearing next month." The words hit me like a wave of relief. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. The law was on my side. When I walked out of the courthouse, I called Mark. "It's done," I said. "Good," he replied. "That's the first step. Now don't let her scare you into backing down. She'll test the boundaries. People like her always do." And he was right. Because that night, as Emily and I sat down for dinner, I heard the familiar sound of a car idling outside. Melissa wasn't done testing me. But now, neither was I. The first test came just 2 nights later. Emily and I were curled up on the couch watching a movie when the doorbell rang, 3 sharp presses, one after another. My stomach sank, because I already knew. I told Emily to stay put and peeked through the peephole. Sure enough, Melissa stood there, arms crossed, smirking like the restraining order was nothing but a piece of paper. "Grace," she shouted, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You think you can sick the cops on me? You think you're better than your own family? Open the damn door." I didn't move. I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed my phone and quietly hit record. I captured her pounding on the door, her voice rising into a shrill rant about how I'd ruined her life, and how I'd pay for humiliating her. When she finally noticed the camera through the window, her face twisted with rage. She flipped me off before storming back to her car. Emily's eyes were wide when I returned to the couch. "Mom, are we safe?" I pulled her close, kissing her hair. "Yes, baby. We're safe. She just made another mistake, that's all." The next morning, I drove straight to the police station with the video. The officer on duty recognized Melissa's name from the restraining order paperwork. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Well, she's made this easy. We'll file a violation report, and if she keeps this up, she'll be facing charges." For years, Melissa had gotten away with everything because no one ever held her accountable. But now? Every step she took against me was another brick in the wall I was building to shut her out permanently. That night, as Emily slept soundly for the first time in weeks, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Melissa thought she was the one in control. But soon, she was going to learn what it felt like to lose. I had always been the one cleaning up Melissa's messes. Growing up, if she wrecked the car, I was the one who lied to cover for her. If she blew her rent money, I was the one who loaned her cash. She thrived on chaos, and I enabled it. But after the restraining order violation, I realized something important. Melissa had more cracks in her armor than she wanted anyone to see. So I started digging. Melissa had always bragged about being self-employed, but I knew the truth. She bounced between odd jobs, never paying taxes, always skating by. A quick conversation with Mark pointed me in the right direction. "You don't need to get your hands dirty," he said. "Just make sure the right people know what she's been doing." I spent a weekend going through old text messages, bank transfers, and the stack of IOUs she'd scribbled on napkins and sticky notes over the years. I had proof of money she'd borrowed and never paid back, jobs she claimed she worked but never did, even a few shady deals she'd roped my mom into. Then I made a few anonymous phone calls, to the unemployment office, to the IRS tip line, even to a couple of people Melissa owed money to. I didn't exaggerate, didn't lie. I just laid out the facts. Melissa had built her life on manipulating people, and I was finally pulling the curtain back. Meanwhile, she kept circling my apartment, testing me, thinking I'd cave. She didn't realize I'd already set things in motion that would come crashing down on her. One night, as I watched Emily sleep, I felt something I hadn't in years. Power. Not the kind that comes from revenge for its own sake, but the kind that comes from finally refusing to be a victim. Melissa wanted a war. But I was about to end it. The fallout started small, almost too small for Melissa to notice at first. But I did. One morning, I was leaving for work when I spotted her car parked a few blocks away. She didn't see me, but I saw her arguing on the phone, her face twisted with frustration. Later that day, Mark texted me, "Word is, unemployment benefits froze her account. They flagged her after a review." I couldn't help the smile that crept across my face. That was just the beginning. A week later, my landlord called again, only this time, it wasn't to question me. He sounded irritated. "Grace, your sister's been harassing my office. Calling, yelling, saying we need to evict you. Don't worry, I've already warned her that if she steps foot on the property again, I'll call the police. Just thought you should know." I thanked him, hung up, and added another note to my growing file. Every move she made was working against her now. Then came the real blow. Melissa showed up at my office one afternoon, storming past the receptionist like she owned the place. Before she could reach my desk, security escorted her out. My boss called me in afterward, clearly shaken. "She tried to tell us you were unstable and stealing from the company," he said, frowning. "But we've known you long enough to know better. Grace, I don't know what's going on, but I'm sorry you're dealing with this." Humiliation. That was the one thing Melissa couldn't handle, and now it was happening in public, where she couldn't control the narrative. That night, I found another note taped to my door, this one written in all caps. "You think you've won. This isn't over." But deep down, I knew it was over. Melissa was unraveling. And I was the one pulling the thread. It was only a matter of time before the walls came crashing down on Melissa. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was making spaghetti for Emily when my phone buzzed. It was Mark. His tone was calm, but there was a heaviness to it. "Grace, just so you're aware, Melissa was picked up today. She violated the restraining order again. Showed up at your mom's place drunk, screaming about you. Neighbors called it in. When the officers ran her name, a few other things popped up: unpaid fines, fraud investigations. She's in holding now." For a moment, I just stood there, wooden spoon in hand, letting the words sink in. Melissa, my sister who had bullied, manipulated, and tormented me for years, was finally facing the consequences she had always outrun. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. When I hung up, Emily looked at me nervously. "Mom? What happened?" I crouched down and brushed her hair out of her face. "It's okay, sweetheart. Your aunt's not going to bother us anymore." Relief washed over her eyes, and she hugged me tightly. The next day, I heard from my landlord again. "Grace," he said, almost chuckling, "your sister tried calling from jail, telling me you were subletting the place to criminals. I told her if she keeps harassing me, I'll file my own restraining order. Just thought you'd appreciate the update." I did. Every lie she threw out was backfiring now. "And Mom?" She went quiet. No more calls, no more notes, no more siding with Melissa. I suspected she was too embarrassed, maybe even scared, to reach out. Part of me ached for her. She'd chosen Melissa's chaos over me, and now she was left to sit in it. But for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about that. I felt free. Melissa's game was over. And all that was left was reclaiming the life she had tried so hard to destroy. The day the court made the restraining order permanent, I walked out of the courthouse with Emily by my side. The sun was warm on my face, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without something heavy pressing down on my chest. Melissa didn't show up for the hearing. From what I'd heard, she was bouncing between legal troubles and burned bridges, the consequences of years of selfish choices finally catching up to her. For once, it wasn't my burden to carry. Life slowly settled into something beautiful. Our apartment was peaceful, no more slammed doors, no more constant tension. Even the air felt different, lighter. Emily laughed more. She invited friends over without worrying about her aunt's cruel comments or her grandmother's disapproving looks. She was just a kid again, free to feel safe in her own home. I found myself smiling more, too. I went back to painting in the evenings, something I hadn't done in years. The walls of our living room began to fill with color, a quiet reminder that this was our space now, free of intrusion. One night, as Emily and I sat on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker, she leaned against me and whispered, "Mom, I'm proud of you." Those words nearly broke me. Because for so long, I had been afraid that standing up for myself would make me a bad daughter, a bad sister, maybe even a bad mother. But hearing my daughter say she was proud, that was all the proof I needed that I had done the right thing. Melissa may have thought she could break me, but in the end, she gave me the greatest gift, the chance to finally stand up, to take control of my life, and to show Emily what real strength looks like. And that's exactly what I did. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was free.